this question, and the question is, give me the evidence that Christianity is true, that Jesus is God, things of that nature. So I'll thinking they're honest, I'm going to go down the evidence, and I'll cite the scientific evidence, the historical evidence, the archaeological evidence.
Well, that evidence must be really compelling for you to not even mention it here.
Third-party evidence.
If by third party you mean second-hand, I don't count that. But if you mean confirmed by historians later on, then I also don't count that, because more often than not, those accounts have been forged to conform history with current mythologies, like the Roman Empire.
Fulfilled prophetic evidence.
I've heard several fulfilled prophecies. Half of them were fulfilled in the exact same book, and a quarter of them were fulfilled in the exact same chapter, so that shit doesn't count. However, if you're referring to prophecies in the Bible that were fulfilled in modern day, that's epic shit. You should be talking about that right now.
Statistical probabilities.
Yawn. If you rewind anything far enough back, you'll find it statistically unlikely to happen. That doesn't mean that it's impossible.
I'll cite the eyewitness accounts of over 500 people that saw the events.
Well, then I'll be the millionth person to say eyewitness accounts are unreliable. At least 500 people have said that they've seen Elvis alive. That doesn't mean the king is alive.
25,000 pieces of parchments and documents that are original and show that the text has never been altered.
Original? Original. You know what original means, right? The first, the alpha, the starting point. There were none before it. Original. There are no original texts from the Bible. Zero. There are none. The oldest that we have are the Dead Sea Scrolls, and parts of them that have survived are not actually 100%. They're very similar, yes, but not 100% the same. Plus, on top of that, a lot of it is in Hebrew, and modern Hebrew is not the same thing as ancient Hebrew. It's a reborn language. It was dead for several hundred years, in fact. Even if the ancient texts managed to stay the exact same, that doesn't mean that the language that we've derived from that text is in any way accurate. Now, it's very likely to be extremely accurate, but there's no way of knowing if it's 100%. I mean, we already know of a few language problems from the Bible. We are pretty good at transcribing ancient languages and dead languages, but I mean, we've been working on ancient Egyptian longer than Hebrew, and we still haven't figured that shit out. Not completely, at least. Let me give you an example, because language is not the same in each dialect. You're not just changing words to mean the same word. You're not just taking orange and turning it into orange and saying, oh, that's the same word. Ancient Hebrew and English have a lot of differences other than just the way that words are pronounced and the meanings of words. For example, the second commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. A direct translation into English is, gods to you shall have not my face beside other. What the fuck does that mean? Are we even translating that right? Does this not literally say that we're not supposed to put God's actual literal face beside other gods? What does that mean?
I mean, I go through mountains and mountains of evidence only to have them say at the end, well, that doesn't really count. That's not really evidence. You still don't have any proof that God exists, and you certainly don't have any proof that Jesus is God. Well, the first time I heard that, it was pretty stunning. I was actually stunned into silence. I didn't know what to say to that, because whenever you're speaking with somebody, you show them evidence, naturally you think that they're actually going to look at the evidence and find out for sure for themselves, like millions and actually billions of other people have done, that it actually does exist.
Yeah, that's what you would expect if what you said was actually solid evidence and not just thought experiments and debunked bullshit from the past.
But an atheist will just sort of brush it all aside and say that it doesn't really count. Well, I came on the one question that all atheists fear and no atheist can answer by accident. Because one day I was so flustered I said, okay, show me the evidence you have to prove that God does not exist.
No. Irrelevant. Give me proof that leprechauns don't exist. It's a pointless thing to say to a scientifically or skeptically minded person. It has nothing to do with atheism. It has everything to do with skepticism. You've made a positive claim. You have to back up that positive claim with solid empirical evidence. We have not made any such claim. Therefore, we have no reason to back it up.
And I got an answer like this. It was a blank stare. They don't have evidence that God doesn't exist. None. They never have.
And that's just dawning on you? Irrelevant. I have no evidence that invisible elephants don't exist. That Doesn't mean that they don't. But I reject the notion of it because we have no evidence at all that invisible anythings can exist. So, is that okay? I guess it's only okay when it's not God.
And the very thing they accuse Christians of having, which is blind faith, turns out is exactly what atheists have. They have no evidence to support their position. They have no evidence to support that God doesn't exist. So they live with a blind faith that God doesn't exist.
Oh, it's so painful. Seriously, we have no faith in anything. Or at least I don't. I have no faith that God exists. That should just be the end of the conversation right there. I also have no faith that God doesn't exist. Why pretend like he does when I don't think that he does? What's the point of that?
I mean, I thought that was interesting and a little bit poetic. That's it for this video.
It's a seriously easy concept. You have faith that God exists. That's fine. Go about your day. I will not bother you. You have faith that he exists, but I do not have faith that he exists. I lack faith. I'm not advocating the opposite. I am just rejecting the positive. All right, that one sucked. Let's go to the next video.
This is the next in the series. The atheist and his burden of proof. I'm frequently asked a question all the time to prove as a Christian that God exists. When this happens, and by the way, they always tell me it's you who make an extraordinary claim that God exists, so it's up to me as a Christian to prove that he exists.
Correct, and that's a rule, or a law, if you will, within logic and science. You can't break that rule. There's a reason why burden of proof exists.
Well, that's no problem. When they do that, I always point them to 6 videos I did called Is the Bible Trustworthy? Videos 1 through 6. They're all short videos, generally less than 8 minutes. Easy to prove for any honest person who wants to see evidence. There's plenty there to convince them that Jesus is God and that the Bible is true.
I've watched these videos. Maybe I'll do them on the channel here someday, but they're terrible. They don't present any evidence for anything. Most of what he mentions has been debunked years ago, and all the other stuff is the same rhetoric that we hear over and over again.
However, it is not the Christian that makes the extraordinary claim.
Oh, do tell.
This is just a false charge that atheists have, because the Christian, just like the atheist, lives in God's creation. We breathe the air he gave us. We look at the stars, we look at the moons, we look at the earth and the oceans and everything he created.
This is what you use as evidence? No fucking wonder people are saying that you're not giving them evidence. Look around you? That's your argument? That means nothing.
It's obvious there's a creator. Just as obvious as when you sit down in a chair, the chair had a creator.
I know where this kind of confusion comes from. You see, our brains are pattern seeking. It's part of the way that we functioned in nature before we became a civilized society. We have art, we have furniture, we have architecture, and we know these things are designed because we design them. And we design them with a purpose. They have a purpose and they have a function. And our pattern-seeking brains will see nature and see that things in nature seem to have a function and seem to work as a cohesive unit. And our brain tells us intuitively that because things have a function and a purpose, they must be, in the end, designed. But that's not a very logical way of looking at things. That's much more intuitive. Intuition is denounced in science. Now, not coming up with ideas in the beginning, but coming up with results and understanding results. We don't allow intuition at all. Things have to be backed up with empirical evidence.
So it's not the Christian who has the burden of proof. It is actually the atheist that has the burden of proof, because if you say God does not exist, which is the basic claim that atheists have.
Oh, that's right, mister. Please tell me more about what I believe.
God does not exist. That is an extraordinary claim.
Are you trying to redefine the word ordinary now? It is quite ordinary for me to leave my house, to not run into any gods, to not speak to any gods, to not see any gods, and to not feel the existence of any gods. It would be quite extraordinary if tomorrow I walked out my front door and there was a god sitting there in front of me. You do understand what ordinary means, right?
And as atheists will tell any Christian, the person who makes the extraordinary claim has the extraordinary burden of proof. You have to come up with the proof that God does not exist, because we live in the creation that he gave us with the sun, the moon, the stars, the ocean. It is the burden of proof of the atheist to prove that God does not exist.
Well, actually, anybody that makes a positive claim has the burden of proof, but Carl Sagan's quote that you're looking for here is that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So you're kind of mixing up the terms here, but whatever. This is another lesson on you don't know what the fuck extraordinary means.
So I ask you, what is your evidence that God does not exist? You prove it. It's your burden, not ours.
So it seems to me that this whole video is just a hissy fit because somebody told you that a god is an extraordinary concept and you said, well, I base my whole life on that, and you got upset about it and just said, I don't have to prove it, you have to prove it.
Okay, today we're going to cover the atheists and silly semantics.
Alright, so today we're going to cover this guy and not understanding the difference between terms.
When I go out and debate atheists, I ask them one question: what is the evidence you have to prove that God does not exist? And that's interesting. We all know that you cannot prove a negative.
Well, you can prove some negatives, but that rule does apply here. It applies with the concept of a god, so yes, you cannot prove this particular negative. However, if I've not already pointed it out, atheism does not make the claim that God does not exist. What atheism does is listen to your claim that a god exists and fails to believe that claim. Atheism acknowledges that there is a hypothesis, that there is an ethereal sky daddy, and atheism says, I reject that concept. Atheism says, I do not have faith in your God. Atheism does not say there are no gods. It says, I do not believe. And just to point out, sometimes atheists are actually interested. They want to know if a god exists or not. And some atheists actually want to believe. Like, I kind of want to believe that there's a god of specific types, and I look to people who say there is a god, and I will ask them, hey, if there's proof, give it to me. I'm really interested. And when they come back to me with, I don't have to prove it, you have to prove it, that doesn't really make for a great conversation. You see, a skeptically minded person cannot believe something out of faith, and I realize that is the cornerstone of your religion. But a skeptic needs evidence. We can't believe things out of faith. We need evidence. And if you've got evidence, give me evidence, but it has to be real evidence, not look around you.
And the honest atheist will admit they can't prove a negative, which, by the way, means that they have a blind faith. The same thing they accuse Christians of having. Kind of poetic, don't you think?
Oh yeah, it's really waxing fucking poetic. No. You are completely misrepresenting atheism. Atheists do not have faith in anything ethereal. Do you understand? This is a very important point I need to drill home into your head. Okay, let me just point this out. You have faith that God exists, and atheists do not have faith. You see? You do have faith. Atheists do not have faith. Getting it? What you're saying is that atheists do have faith in the opposite, but that's not true. No, atheists do not have faith in the opposite of faith. No, they do not have faith. You get it?
The other ones, the ones that are a little bit deceptive, they're going to dance around that question, and they're going to dance and dance and dance. I debate some atheists sometimes for weeks, and I ask them the same question over and over. What is the evidence you have for God not existing? And they will dance and keep dancing and keep dancing. Then they'll talk to somebody like Thunderfoot, seems to be the atheist's go-to guy.
Thunderfoot is the atheist go-to guy. Jeez, do you remember those days? Now it's 2014. Everybody goes to Armoured Skeptic!
And he'll tell them to say that the onus is on me because I make a positive statement of faith that God does exist and I should prove it. Then I refer them to my 6 videos. Is the Bible trustworthy? Videos 1 through 6, which anybody can find on YouTube. And they'll come back and they reject all the evidence, of course, something you would expect.
So do you expect atheists to just reject your videos? Then why did you make them? Or do you expect them to reject them because you made them poorly?
But the other thing they'll say is that they don't make a positive statement that God doesn't exist.
Holy shit, I think we're getting through to them.
They're going to start playing silly semantic games. Now, what they're going to say is exactly what I've heard hundreds of times, and that is this. I don't claim a positive faith in God's non-existence. What I claim is that I lack the faith in God's existence. Well, guess what? It's just semantics. It means the exact same thing.
No, they are completely different. Okay, so saying I don't believe is saying that you're skeptical, saying you're open to believing, just you don't. Whereas saying God doesn't exist, I'm saying that I not only don't believe he doesn't exist, I believe that he doesn't. You see the difference? No, okay, we this, fuck. Why? Can you pass me an aspirin? The fucking blue kind!
If I claim this watch does not exist, but then I go on and claim, well, actually, I simply lack the faith that this watch exists, the end result is the same thing.
Okay, the end result is the same technically, but how we got there is different. And that's important because one's a knowledge claim. You're saying that you know that he doesn't exist. Say you said that your wife did ballet. I would say, I didn't know that. And you said, yeah. And I said, well, I don't think she's graceful enough for it. Are you sure? Like, I'm kind of skeptical. I don't really believe that she could do it. And you say, yeah, she can do ballet. I'm not saying she doesn't. I'm not saying, fuck you, dude. Your wife can't do ballet. She's just not graceful enough to do it. I'm saying, oh, well, I didn't really think that was possible. I would have to see it to believe it. Why is that so fucking hard to... Why the fuck can't you understand this shit?
In their mind, the watch does not exist. It is the same thing. It's just silly semantics, and it's more tap dancing.
It's not tap dancing to act as if something doesn't exist if you don't believe that it exists. Even if it does. Why pretend that it does if you don't believe that it does? God may very well exist, but I don't believe it. Why should I act like he does if I don't believe it? It's not a tap dance, it's just pragmatism.
Okay, this video is titled The Atheist Delusion. Obviously, it's a riff on Dawkins' book, The God Delusion.
Lame.
Atheists have a real problem. Atheists don't have a leg to stand on. They don't have any evidence for their belief.
Atheists have no evidence for your belief. But that was close.
So, to try and squirm out of this problem, what they do is they exist now with a delusion. They call themselves atheist agnostics or agnostic atheists. And this is a real strange thing to call themselves because the classic definition of an atheist is somebody who says God does not exist.
Well, you said it, mister. I see that shit all the time.
It's a pretty definitive statement. It's a statement that closes all doors to the possibility that God exists.
Right, which is why most atheists don't say that. They just say they don't believe, okay? They're open to believing, just that they don't.
And on the other hand, you have them claiming agnosticism. Well, agnosticism is the possibility that God may exist.
Atheism and agnosticism are not different forms of belief or different belief systems. They don't even refer to the same thing. Atheism and theism refer to belief, whereas Gnosticism or agnosticism refer to knowledge. Those are both separate categories. So you can be a Gnostic atheist, an atheist that knows there is no God, or you can be a Gnostic theist, a theist that knows there is a God, or you can be an agnostic atheist, an atheist that doesn't know if there's a God, and an agnostic theist, a believer in God who doesn't really know but still believes, which is the strangest of the four, I realize, but they exist. Now, we live in a world that people want to identify themselves, and they also want to avoid identifying themselves as specific things. So when you're a fence sitter, somebody who's not decided, somebody who is spiritual and kind of may believe in God but doesn't really follow theism and doesn't necessarily know that there's a God, these people will tend to call themselves agnostics. Now, socially, we recognize that as meaning somebody who's a fence sitter, but in technical terms, that just means that they don't know. As to what their belief is, it actually makes no claim on their belief. Saying you're an agnostic, you're not actually claiming that you're not a believer. Again, knowledge and belief are two separate things.
So when they claim that they have an agnostic atheistic belief or an atheistic agnostic belief, what they're claiming is God does not exist. But on the other hand, maybe he does.
Oh boy, mister, you just make so much sense. Oh, I just love you so much. When this is over, we should get an apartment together.
It's kind of like saying, this watch does not exist. Closed door, shut case. On the other hand, maybe it does.
Dude, enough with the watch. It's a bad example because we can all clearly see the fucking watch on your wrist. Well, sorry if you're blind and you can't actually see it. There's a watch on his hand. It's clearly there. It's a bad example.
Well, you can't be one or the other because they're polar opposites. But this is the delusion that atheists exist on. It's the plane that they're playing on now because they've been busted.
No, they're not polar opposites. Assuming that your straw man is correct and atheists say that God does not exist, the polar opposite of that is that he does, not maybe.
They have no evidence to support that God doesn't exist. And the truth is, atheists don't exist.
I don't? I don't exist? Oh my god, what's happening to me? Was I just willing myself into existence? Now that I know that I don't exist, I'm not existent anymore. Tell my mommy. She burns a lasagna.
If you look at my video called Proof Atheists Don't Exist, you'll see why it's absolutely impossible for any honest person to call themselves an atheist.
Wait, I can't stop existing now. We still have yet to get to the pièce de résistance. Besides, I can't stop existing before I remember how I began to exist. How did I begin to exist? I can't remember that far back. There's only one person on this planet that would tell me. I have to summon Satan. Satan, Satan, from the bowels of hell I call thee. Arise, arise!
Hey, buddy.
Oh, Satan, I need your help recalling my origin. Can you help me out with your flashback machine?
No problem. Just close your eyes and let the machine do the work.
He was once just a suit of armor until he was zapped by Satan with a huge freaking apple. All this knowledge. Hey, what the frick is going on here? You guys are stealing my theme song. You can't do that. It's against the 10 Commandments.
Oh, yeah? Which one?
Like 6.5 or something. Look, do I have to get my lawyers involved here?
Relax, Creationist Cat. We were just having a little fun here. Didn't you think that was funny?
You think God has a sense of humor? He created AIDS, cancer, Law and Order Special Victims Unit. He's not a fan of comedy.
Look, I just wanted to help my buddy out.
Like that time you helped Eve out with that apple, Satan?
Oh, come on. You think Yahweh wasn't in on that? He's all-powerful and all-knowing. How could he not have been?
Hey, that's my daddy you're talking about.
Well, your daddy's a jerk.
Listen, BL's a dork. I think you caused enough damage here. Why don't you just go away?
No way. I just got here. Why don't you turn around and walk out the door? The door. Now you got me doing it.
Hey, don't make fun of my speech impediment, babyface!
Don't make fun of my baby face, fat ass.
If I may interject.
Not now!
Holy shit! My fortune cookie was right!
So it's a delusion that many of them are turning to just to try and confuse the public on what actually is going on. And what's going on is that they've been busted and they know they have an untenable position with zero evidence to support it. So now they're running scared and they're creating new definitions.
Or maybe, just maybe, you still don't understand what atheism is. Just throwing that out there. Come on, man, why do you spend so much time trying to prove that your God exists?
It's just an interesting delusion.
Hey, yo!
Alright, this video is titled The Dangers of Atheism. There's a problem that goes on with atheism that I think most atheists probably never consider, but a lot of Christians do consider, and that's the dangers of atheistic thought.
Wait, my thoughts are dangerous? Get out of my head, you stupid thoughts!
The reason there's a danger is because if there is no God, then there is no set moral standard that man is required to abide by.
Well, pretty much, but it depends on what you mean by morality. If you mean good and bad, right and wrong, then no, that's just simple logic. It's good to do something that benefits the tribe, and it's bad to do something that is detrimental to the tribe. It's good to do something to yourself that is good for yourself, and it's bad to do something to yourself that's detrimental to yourself. Anything else is a gray area, and that's usually where what we call morality comes in.
When you ask yourself, where could a possible moral standard come from, you would have to conclude that the only place you can get a moral standard, according to the atheistic thought process, would be from mankind.
Morality is a set of standards, a set of rules that we feel that we should follow, and it's usually because those rules have been imposed upon us by some sort of a leader. For the longest time, it was the Pope that imposed rules, and you know what? Even the modern Pope does. The modern Pope thinks it's immoral to give contraceptives to people who are at risk of contracting AIDS, and passing that AIDS on to the many children that they would consequently have. Does that sound immoral? Because the Pope says it's immoral. See, this all comes down to the fact that morality is subjective.
So then the question becomes, what man is going to set that standard? And here's where the danger comes from. If you look throughout history, you see that who's ever got total power is the one that sets the moral standards.
Part of the problem is morality itself is a very nebulous term. It doesn't actually really mean anything on its own. It really drums up a lot of ideas and concepts and feelings, but the word itself does not have a finite, solid meaning. What does everything always come down to? Does it feel good or not feel good to do something? If you hurt somebody's feelings, does it not hurt your own feelings? That's empathy. That's not morality. Is it good to do something that's good for the village? That's benefit. That's not morality. Morality is always something that ends up being imposed after the fact. Something that covers the gray areas. And it's always because I said so. And it's always subjective. And let me just concede to your notion that God exists. Say God created an objective morality. Well, since God created it, and since God is the constructor, and he is the rule maker, and because God himself is a subject, that by definition makes morality subjective.
And this is a problem for atheists, because an atheist will generally believe that evolution is true. Mankind is the highest level in the evolutionary scale, so mankind gets to set the standard.
Well, not gets to, but has to, because we have to get along. Besides, we've observed moral codes in elephants, in dolphins, and in other apes. We know that we're not the only ones that have a sense of morality.
The real issue, though, is who sets the standards for man. And logic would have to dictate that it is whoever is in charge of that section of mankind.
Well, usually it's either a piece of paper or a tyrant. It's never good. But just because it's not good doesn't mean that God exists. It doesn't mean it's a problem for atheists. Things don't have to be perfect just because God doesn't exist.
Now, this leads me to something to let you know that atheists in America are no threat. So they're not a danger. And the reason for that is because America was founded on Christian principles.
It was?
There is no real threat by atheists in America because America, whether you believe in God or not, is still governed by the Ten Commandments. It was the foundation stone for all our laws in America. And still in America, most laws are written with a moral understanding. Thou shalt not kill. They're all based off the Ten Commandments as a basic standard today, even today, as far away from God as we become.
So that's why it's illegal to worship any other god other than Yahweh, and that's why it's illegal to make statues of other gods, and that's why it's illegal to work on the Sabbath, and that's why it's illegal.
It's not American atheists that are really a danger. It's atheists from around the world.
What, like around the other side or all the way around? Which other countries?
And if America ever gets rid of its Christian foundation, atheists in America will be a danger as well. You just look at some of the people in history who have been atheists or believed in the atheist ideology, which would include also secular humanists and generally people who believe in evolution.
There is no atheist ideology, okay? There are a billion atheists, and each one is a completely different type of atheist, all right? There is no ideology. Secular humanism and the belief in evolution, again, have nothing to do with atheism.
You've got Hitler, Pol Pot, Stalin, Mao Zedong, all those dictators who have killed so many people.
First off, let's just get this out of the way. Hitler was a Catholic. That's a fact. So let's just forget about that. What they did had nothing to do with the fact that they were atheists, nor secular humanists, nor they believed in evolution. That didn't factor in at all. And I would like you to make a case as to why it would. The truth is, they were just dicks. And lots of dictators over the years have been dicks, and lots of dictators have murdered their own people and other people for really bad reasons.
There's a serious danger with atheistic thoughts, because if God doesn't set the standard, man is left to set his own standard. And according to the Christian belief, if man is set to set his own standard, he will set an evil standard.
Well, good for Christian belief, I guess, but I set my own standard, and guess what? 0 people have died.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about this book. It's by Dr. D. James Kennedy. It's called What If Jesus Had Never Been Born?
He never was.
And this is a book, Atheists, that you're going to definitely want to read. And the reason for that is because since you're an atheist, I know a lot of you have this viewpoint that you want to have an earth where there is no religion. And we've already had an earth that had no religion. This book explains what that was like, and it wasn't the utopia that many atheists think that it would be. Secular humanists and evolutionists and all the other people that believe like you believe.
Hello, are you forgetting 3,000 supposed years of Hebrew history before that point? Was that not a religion? The world was full of religion before Jesus came along. The Hebrews, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, everybody had a religion. You know, Jesus came along to abolish religion. Have you ever read the Bible? He denounces religion.
It is definitely not the utopia that you think you would get. But this book is an interesting book for all people to read, especially atheists, so you could see that. In this book, there's a question that's asked, and that question is this: what is a human being to you? Because the way you answer that question, what is a human being to you, determines exactly what it is that you can do to one.
How do you figure? Are you saying that if God doesn't exist, you'd be willing to do unspeakable acts to animals and people? Because as it is, I'm an atheist, and I treat animals with probably even more respect than humans. If I were to decide one day to treat humans the same as animals, I would only be improving the way I treat humans.
Now, if a human being is created in the image of God, you have to treat that human being with the same kind of reverence, respect, kindness, and love that you would treat God. But if a human is nothing more than a compilation of evolution, and let's face it, if you're an atheist, you've got no place to go. You have to believe in that theory, that man is nothing more than a compilation of animals. And if man is nothing but an animal, then that determines what you can do to them. Look what we do to animals already. We hunt them, we shoot them, we skin them, use their pelts for jackets and for footballs and for shoes and all kinds of things. We do medical experiments on animals. We do all kinds of things to them. Atheists, if you get a world that is void of what the Bible teaches, then you're going to experience the kind of a world that we never want to see again, the world that's described in this book. I certainly hope you get this book, because honestly, atheists, if you think this through, you're going to get not the utopia you think you're going to get. You're going to get a world that we've already had, and that's not the kind of world anybody wants to live in. Nobody.
So, believe in God or become a football.
I certainly hope you'll join me in praying that we always have leaders that believe man is made in the image of God, and certainly never have a leader that has any kind of authority that believes man is the supreme being, the compilation of all those animals. Because that will certainly be the destruction and the fall of mankind.
Oh, I don't know. The future's impossible to predict, but I really don't want to have any more leaders that think that their ethereal sky daddy dictates what they do, and they make decisions based on a 2,000-year-old book.
Okay, this is our last video.
La pièce de résistance.
And this video is titled, Is Atheism Credible?
You know, I don't understand why he dictates the title of the video at the beginning of every video, because so far none of them have been accurate. This video is titled Atheists Don't Exist.
Atheists don't believe that there is a God.
Boy, mister, are you sure?
Oh, wait. He said it right this time. Oh well, law of averages.
Whenever you're talking to an atheist, you ask them if you can have them participate in a little demonstration. Of course, they're going to agree to it.
What makes you think I'm going to agree to anything? You know, the evidence you've presented so far is really weak, but what I hate worse than bad evidence is thought experiments. Thought experiments don't prove anything.
What you'll do is you'll take a piece of paper like this, and then you're going to draw a circle. You're going to say, okay, Mr. Atheist, can we agree, for the purposes of this illustration, can we just agree that all the knowledge that exists in the universe exists inside this circle. Is that okay? And the atheist is going to say, yes, that's okay.
Yes, I know I jokingly said no at the beginning, but there's a reason I said no to this part, because it's a misleading question. First of all, we need to come to an agreement on what the terms mean. What is knowledge? Knowledge, as far as I'm concerned, is just imprinted information inside of our brains and the brains of animals. So all the knowledge in the universe is just all the knowledge that corporeal beings have. But I can already tell from the way that he's setting up this question that he's using the word knowledge as some sort of a nebulous term, like knowledge can exist outside of brains. And as far as I'm concerned, no. Humans contain the only scientific knowledge of the universe. Until, we meet aliens that also do.
And what you do is you'll hand them a pen and you'll ask them to mark how much of this knowledge they currently possess. And they're going to put a little dot here.
No way, dude. Have you ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? Everybody would draw an enormous circle. But even if I'm being modest, I scratch the surface on a lot of topics, and I know a lot about quite a few topics, so my circle is not going to be just a dot. It's going to be a really big dot.
So you're going to say, Mr. Atheist, I just want to make sure I get this correct. If all the knowledge that exists in the universe exists inside this circle, and the current knowledge that you do currently possess exists inside this little dot, is it possible that in the knowledge that you do not yet possess, God exists someplace in there?
Well, who's God? Which God? Because we're going to have to come to an agreement on that term, too. Can you define God? Can you define God in a way that's not contradictory? Is it the God of the Bible? Because I already know that God's a contradiction, so what little I already know about the universe teaches me that no contradictions can exist within reality. But could a God exist? Sure. Even outside of this thought experiment, I'm willing to admit that. I bet that you wouldn't find a single atheist that wouldn't be willing to admit that a God could exist outside of our knowledge. But that doesn't validate Christianity.
And of course he's going to have to say, yes, I guess that is possible. God could exist there. So you have to ask yourself, is the belief in atheism a credible belief?
I'm back, motherfuckers.
So let me ask you something else. Demonstration's over, by the way. Since we know in some gigantic cosmic circle, all the knowledge in the universe does exist.
Whoa. And this is exactly why I didn't agree to your terms. Because that doesn't make any sense. How could all the knowledge in the universe exist within a circle? Knowledge isn't a tangible thing, first of all. And even if you do break it down, what are you referring to as knowledge? Are you referring to literally what we have stored in the capacity of human brains and papers and books and the internet? Or are you talking about things that we have yet to learn? Because that's not knowledge. That is the unknown, and you cannot quantify that.
And we know that no human could ever possess that knowledge.
Do we know that? Because I've known some pretty smart people, and I've known of some very, very smart people that if they spent less time trying to figure out new things and more time just learning what we already knew, then they could probably learn a lot of it, depending on how long they live.
The only thing that we know is that in some giant cosmic circle, all the knowledge in the universe does exist, and it was put there by somebody or something.
Whoa. Where the fuck did that come from? Okay, that is a premise you did not display any evidence for. What makes you think that the knowledge that we have, this imaginary knowledge that we don't have that's out there in the universe, whatever the fuck that means, was put there? Do you really even hear yourself talking right now? None of what you're saying makes any sense.
Well, the somebody or something that put it there has to be greater than that knowledge, or they could never have put it there. The only logical conclusion would be that God put it there. Otherwise, it could not exist.
Yes, the only logical conclusion would be that it would have to be some sort of what we would call a god if your first premise was proven. It is not, by the way. It just came the fuck out of nowhere.
And as long as an atheist will never have absolute knowledge of all of the things, all the knowledge that exists inside that circle, they can never make an honest claim, or I should say an honest claim they can make, because sometimes they don't know, but they can never make a bold claim saying that God does not exist unless they possess absolute knowledge, or all the knowledge that does exist inside that circle.
So even giving you the benefit of the doubt and saying that what you're talking about is the unknown, and because we don't know all of the unknown, we can't know that a God does or does not exist. Granted, agreed. But so what? Neither can you. Do you really want to live your life based on what might be because of a book that was written 2 and 5,000 years ago? Think it through, because that circle with the dot in it just represents your frickin' brain right now.